Thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your busy schedule here at the end of the year to join us. We chose Energize Your Philanthropy for this topic in financial wellness because this is considered the season of giving. So some of the topics that you'll hear today, or strategies that you'll get here today, you still will have time to use for year end. But the majority of what we're going to be talking about is how to energize that philanthropy to maximize your efforts and get you the most for what you're trying to do with philanthropy. Well, let's take a look at where we are, if we can find out how to. Okay, here we go. Philanthropy's been around for a long time. The ideas of noblesse oblige go way, way back. But even one of the founders of our country, Thomas Jefferson, duty of every man to devote a certain portion of his income for charitable purposes. And that is his further duty to see that it's applied so that it does the most good for which it's capable. So it's been around for quite a while. What we want to talk about today is that philanthropy really picks up where government and capitalism leave off. The government does a certain amount of funding for charitable purposes, and they like giving tax breaks in order to make us or entice us to cut some of that cost for the government. But really, quite a bit comes from individuals. When we look at total giving here in the United States, last year it totaled $427 billion. And this is a chart showing going back to 1978. Also in here, you see the different colors. These darker areas that we're looking at here are when we had recessions, and the most notable, the last one, was the Great Recession right around 2008. And what you notice there is that giving does drop off somewhat in those times, but since that 2009, we have continued on that upward climb, and people do have open hearts to the tune of about $427 billion. When we look at who they're giving to, this one, 2018, was the first year that religion dropped below 30% of the recipients on all that charitable giving. So that means we are getting a broader sense of what the causes are that we're looking at. During the recessions, the ones that usually take a hit are things like environment and animals and arts and culture, which have a small piece of the pie to begin with, but during recessions, those are the ones that typically get hurt. So who gives that money? When we look at foundations and corporations, we can see that fully 2/3 of the donations, or $292 billion, comes from individuals like you and I. If we would add in bequests are those that are left in our estates, we can see that individuals really make up about 3/4 of the contributions in those charitable sides. Now, we go to Michael Porter, who's at Harvard Business School. He says, billions are wasted on ineffective philanthropy. Philanthropy is decades behind business in applying rigorous applications to make good use of those assets. So when we start looking at what philanthropy's role in planning, we call this doing well while doing good. We can see that there's areas that it can actually benefit yourself while benefiting others. And we'll try to find some of those. Lastly, before we get started, I'd like to talk a little bit about taxes. And Judge Learned Hand, what a great name for a Supreme Court justice, said anyone can arrange his affairs so that his taxes are low as possible. He's not bound to choose the way that pays best to the Treasury. There's not even a patriotic duty to increase one's taxes. Everyone does it, rich and poor alike, and all do it for right, for nobody owes any public duty to pay more than the law demands. So when we look at how the tax laws are written, the tax laws are actually written to, again, entice us to do things that are going to lower the cost for the government. And so as long as we're using tax avoidance, not tax evasion, these become very important to us. So it's important that when we start out, we understand what's controllable and what's not controllable, both now and in the future, because some of these things are going to not look efficient today, but over the long run, they are what becomes controllable. Not like my Alexa app that seems to not do anything I want it to do. So let's start with Congress. Congress recently went through tax reform. And if you recall, the big issue on tax reform was that we would now be able to file taxes on a postcard filing. Well, they tried to do that. And I guess if we look at the 2018 forms, they did make it a postcard size. But this postcard just really has our name and address and our signatures on here. The second page on a postcard really did reduce quite a bit of the size, but as I starred several places here, not all of them, each one of these lines go to other schedules, and so it sometimes seems even more complicated than it was prior. But one of the biggest issues that does affect charities is when they changed how we do our standard deductions. We have an option to itemize deductions or take the standard deduction, which for individuals is $12,000, and for married filing joint is $24,000. This in effect doubled the standard deduction and made it so a lot of people do not itemize the taxes anymore, because some of the things that they did on the itemization along there is they limited state and local taxes to $10,000, which makes a lot of people who are paying high real estate taxes, high income taxes, this eliminates some of their ability to itemize. Interest that we paid. Those of you that have lines of credit on your house found out in 2018 where the lines of credit used to be deductible as mortgage interest no longer are deductible, again lowering what we have. Medical and charity were left somewhat untouched. Still medical, you have to get over 7.5% of your income to be deductible. Charity is virtually the same as it used to be. But if we have those limitations above on interest and on taxes, a lot of times the charitable contributions don't add up enough to go past those standard deductions. In essence, what happened between 2017 and 2018, we went from 46.5 million people filing itemized deductions to only 18 million. So what about charity? How do we take up those places where charity loses out? Well, one of them is Congress has allowed us now to do what we call qualified charitable distribution, or a QCD. This is from our IRAs, and those of you that are 70 and a half and have to take required minimum distributions from your IRA know sometimes you don't want the money, but it's forced out. Other of you want to arrange how your taxable and tax qualified accounts look ahead of the time that you're going to have to take out required minimum distributions. But we know that typically, if we would have donations made directly from the IRA custodian to the qualified charity, that is considered non-taxable. Well, what do we mean? Say we had $10,000 that came out of our IRA and went on the tax return, we would enter a zero on the taxable amount for the fact that it went to charity. This, in essence, takes it off of that deduction and puts it on the front of the 1040. And by doing that, it also moves to above the line deductions. By above the line, it means that in Ohio, this will also affect Ohio income taxes, where before that IRA distribution would be taxable, we would not get the charitable deduction. So this is a big bonus that we've gotten on charitable contributions. So if you are making charitable contributions and you are taking distributions from your IRA, consider a qualified charitable distribution. Another way that we can increase our charitable giving and save on taxes is if we give what we call appreciated assets. such as stock or mutual funds that we've held for a long time. And sometimes we find people not want to trade out of things that they should because they'd have to pay a lot of taxes on capital gains. Well, if instead of selling those and giving giving cash to the charity and paying taxes on that, if instead we give the appreciated assets to the charity, we can receive a full fair market value of the asset as a charitable write-off. So if we bought a stock for $10,000, sold it, or it's worth $20,000, and we donated that, we would be able to write off as a charitable deduction $20,000 in its entirety and not pay the capital gains tax on the gain of $10,000 in here. So you and the charity both escape the capital gains tax on the assets. So as we mentioned earlier, tax planning is always about total benefit, not the current benefit. So as we grow older, I pay less attention to what men say. I watch what they do. This was from Andrew Carnegie, who himself created family foundations or private foundations, which are available to all of us to create a fund for ourselves that we can give to our charitable causes. We get personal satisfaction from the giving, and we can help cement family ties, either by having a pool of these assets that are going to charitable, or even employing those family members to manage the investments and grants. It can identify and preserve your family name far into the future. Donors can receive immediate income tax deductions when they donate to the private foundation, and can reduce or eliminate capital gains, gifts, and estate taxes in some of the ways that we were just talking about, and can provide continuing employment and activity to donors or family members, again, in controlling the investments or doing the grants. But there are a lot of issues that go along with this that make it tougher. There are upfront legal fees, and they can be substantial to create private foundations. There's a 2% annual excise tax imposed on the net investment income. Lower deductions are allowed for going to private foundations than they are to public charities. There's a mandatory 5% payout. We have to pay out 5% of the corpus of the foundation each year, or suffer some penalties. And there's rigorous reporting requirements where we'll have to employ someone to do the reporting for us. And IRS has quite a few imposed limitations on those family members, considering self-dealing and such. Taxes and penalties for the violations of those can be pretty severe, and it requires a lot of public disclosure. So private foundations are very good and very helpful, but you only really consider private foundations if you're going to have a very significant amount going to the charity. Now, a private foundation more for people that drive Fords instead of their name being Ford might be something like a donor advised fund. What a donor advised fund is, it's an alternative to the private foundation, but it's easier to create and manage and requires much less money to do so. The donor advised fund invests your donations and makes grants to charities. You give advice. The donor advised fund is not required to follow your suggestion. That's part of what makes this a tax deductible side. But I will tell you, of all the donor advised funds out there, anyone that would start not taking the advice of the donor would be out of business very quickly, and they know that. So they do follow your advice as long as it is legal. Grants can be made in your name, or they can be made anonymously, or you can name your donor advised fund, the Jim Sailing Fund for a Better World, or whatever that would be. So you do get an immediate income tax deduction when you use a donor advised fund. How does that work? Well, we would have property that would be going to the donor advised fund, and that gives you a charitable write-off of 100%. This could be cash, this could be appreciated assets, whatever you're using in there. You give advice to the donor advised fund that then on how to give grants, how much grants to give, and what charities to give them to, and when to do it. The donor advised fund then would dole out the grants to the charities in your name. And it's operated very easily. They get around the 5% required distribution because the donor advised fund is a pool of assets. And that pool of assets has the 5% requirement, but that's often met by other people who make 100% distribution, or there's very limited times when you have to make any distributions at all if you don't want to in a particular year. But you can give an awful lot of different types of assets there that you can save taxes on. So how do we use that donor advised fund in light of the tax regulation changes? One of the things is if we are not having enough deductions to add up to the standard deduction, so we're forced to not itemize in here, what we can do is move a multi-year charitable deduction into a donor advised fund. In other words, let's say that over the year I give $10,000, or let's say I give $6,000 in a year. If I wanted to, I could move as much as I wanted into a donor advised fund. Let's say 6 years. So 6 times 6,000 is $36,000. I could move that into the donor advised fund and get an immediate tax deduction in that year. And what I would want to do is take those appreciated assets, make that contribution with those, and escape my capital gains tax. Then in offsetting years, I would use the standard deduction, and I would make my donations on the normal schedule of $6,000 a year from my donor advised fund. The charity sees the exact same cash flow that it saw as you were making $6,000 a year, but at least once every few years, when you fund the donor advised fund, then you're going to be able to itemize your deductions because you'll have higher than the standard deduction. In essence, we call that an accordion effect because you'll itemize and then not itemize for a few years, then itemize again, not itemize. So it's one way to get around some of those. And remember that in most cases, tax-free is better than tax-deferred, which is better than taxable. So we can also use this donor advised fund to offset Roth conversion costs. In a year of a large contribution, this could be the DAF or to the charity itself. Consider using that deduction to offset costs of a Roth conversion. Again, using appreciated assets to contribute to the charity or the donor advised fund, escape the capital gains tax on the contributed assets, use the tax savings to fund a Roth. We had a gentleman that did just that. He had about $150,000 he wanted to convert from an IRA to a Roth IRA. We looked at his taxes. He was donating about $10,000 a year to charity. We created a donor advised fund with $100,000 of appreciated assets, got the full write-off of $100,000, did not pay any capital gains on those assets. Since we had a $100,000 write-off on a charitable contribution, we then rolled our IRA to our Roth IRA, or $150,000 of it, in essence, only paying taxes on about $50,000 of that rollover. The effective tax rate to move those assets off of the tax rolls for him was about 8%. All the growth thereafter on that on those $150,000 in assets, all the growth thereafter was tax-free. So again, as we look at that, where we said 2/3 of the amount is individuals, but then we add bequests in there, the giving by bequest has been increasing as well. What we're seeing here is about $39.7 billion in bequests, compared to 1978 of about $10 billion in charitable contributions from there. So we have increased significantly in what's being left to charities. Warren Buffett said, I want to give my kids enough so that they could feel that they could do anything, but not so much that they could do nothing. And many people feel that way. Melinda Gates says, I encourage potential philanthropists to look at millions of ordinary people use their resources to make the world a better place, often a great personal sacrifice. I don't think it's the billionaires who are setting the standard for generosity. It's the people who are giving even when it's hard. But yet they've created the giving pledge, and people have signed on to this. You have the Gates family there. You have Buffett, who have said, I'm going to give at least half of my wealth to charities throughout my lifetime and over in my bequest. They had people sign on. Even a potential presidential candidate has said that he would donate the majority of his wealth. And it's much like the old commercial. They told two people, they told two people. All of these people have signed on to the giving pledge where they are giving significant amounts to charity. So let's look at another strategy to do this. I'm going to pick on Barbara Stanwyck here because I remember she used to be in a place called the Big Valley. Well, we're going to age her. She is a healthy 60-year-old female at this point. And what we're going to do is create what we call a charitable remainder trust. In here, we're going to give $1 million of appreciated assets. Now, the amount of income that we want a trust to give back to us determines what the charitable deduction is. In the case that I picked here, we have a small charitable deduction of $100,000 because I'm going to put in appreciated assets, pay no capital gains. This can happen if you're selling your practice, possibly, where you would have a very high capital gain on selling the practice, but don't want to pay that capital gains because you want that money to create income. In this case, we picked, let me back that up there a second. In this case, we picked 15.4% for a payout. Now, oftentimes payouts are much lower than that, but you can significantly increase the amount of money that you receive for a payout. And the more you increase it, the less the charitable deduction is. So we could have made that charitable deduction much higher than $100,000 had this income stream been lower. But for our example, we wanted that income stream off of that. So that $1 million in there gave her about $150,000 in income. Now, when she died, what would happen with the remainder of the amount of money in the trust? It would go directly to the charity. Now, that could be a charity like the foundation that OAFP has. It could be your own family donor advised fund, your own private foundation, but it must go to a charity. Well, the people that aren't going to be happy are the heirs that were supposed to inherit the ranch and all the money that went with it. And I don't know if I'd want to make Nick very upset at me because he was a little bit of a hothead. So what we can do here to make this work is while we were getting the 15.4% payout, $154,000 in her case, we could use some of that to buy a life insurance policy. So we used some of the $154,000 to pay a life insurance premium that would then, when she died, give the proceeds of that to the heirs, and that those proceeds of the insurance policy would come estate tax-free and income tax-free to the heirs, where the amount of money that was in the trust could possibly have come out with income tax, depending on how it was situated, or estate taxes. So now we've given money to the charity, we've given money to the heirs, everybody's happy in this situation. And this has, as we mentioned, come to state tax-free. We could use a donor advised fund. Just the opposite of that is what we call a charitable lead trust. In this case, we fund the trust and get some charitable deductions depending on how this is set up, and we won't go into the full details on this. If anybody wants the details of a charitable lead trust, please get in contact with us. We'll go through the ins and outs. But in this case, the income, instead of going back to you, goes to the charity. And then either after a period of years, we can make this a finite life, or when you die, then the balance would go to the family whenever the trust ends. There are ways to pass on some highly appreciating assets in here that makes this very attractive. But the income goes to the charity while you're alive or before the end of the trust, and the balance goes to your family, back to your family. Another option we could have, a charitable gift annuity. We can donate cash or appreciated assets to the charity or establish a personal irrevocable charitable annuity with a custodian. So much like the charitable remainder trust, we put in cash. We have an annuity payment that is established for our lifetime. We can include a spouse if we want. But then when we die, the beneficiary is the charity. They get the remainder of what's in the annuity. This is a very oversimplified side of a charitable remainder trust without as much need for that. But we do get an immediate discounted deduction for the present value of the remainder, just like we do on the charitable remainder trust. It's not 100% of what we put in. So next, I want to touch on a way that a lot of people will give and give you a small twist at the end of this. Donations of life insurance. If you're somebody that gives annually to a charity, you may want to buy a new policy and put the charity as a beneficiary. That takes that annual gift that you're giving and gives you leverage to make a much larger donation on your debt. Now, in this case, you're not getting any charitable deduction in here, but it is not taxable in the estate. So there's not a huge tax effect for you. The second thing you could do is donate a new policy. If you're going to buy a new policy, donate it to the charity and then pay the premiums. So if OAFP's foundation owned the policy, you'd be paying the premiums, and the premiums would be tax deductible to you. So you would get the same write-off as you normally do, but the charity itself would get a much larger donation once the insurance policy pays off. You have the charity then does have control of that life insurance policy. Now, oftentimes I've seen people who have had life insurance policies in place and they say, I don't need this life insurance anymore. So they'll look at what to do and maybe donate to an existing charity. Will donate the policy that's there and then let the charity worry about paying the premium to keep it up. But again, getting that on your life. The other options a charity might have is take reduced paid up insurance. So anyway, it will make your gift be a much larger gift. Now, in that case, if this has cash value in it, the cash value or the fair market value of that policy is deductible. It's either that or your premiums that you have paid to this policy, whichever is lower, you would get an immediate deduction for that full amount. Now, the other thing we can do is give the ownership of the policy to the charity, but then we'll keep paying the premiums on it. In that case, we do get the cash value that's immediately deductible, and the premium payments that we're making are also a charitable deduction in the year that we're making them. So there are a lot of ways to give life insurance policies. But another way to think about this, if you were going to give a life insurance policy, whether it's a new policy or a donated policy or however that is, what we can do is say, determine how much life insurance that you're going to give to the charity. Well, let's say we're going to give the charity $500,000. Well, if we then, instead of naming the charity as the beneficiary, we're going to go ahead and get that life insurance policy, and we're going to name our heirs the beneficiary, our kids perhaps. So they become beneficiary of $500,000. The key to remember is that life insurance passes estate and income tax free. Then what we do is we make the charity the beneficiary of something that's going to be taxable to our heirs, such as a traditional IRA, in the amount of the life insurance benefit. So I'm going to pair off a $500,000 for the IRA to make the charity the beneficiary. On that, I'm going to have the life insurance for $500,000 that will restore that amount to my kids. My kids are not going to have to pay income tax on the inherited IRA that they would typically have to do. And that comes often in their highest or peak earning years. So when we look at some of the things that are going through Congress right now, the Secure Act is going to eliminate, as it goes through, the stretch IRA that allows them to stretch out over their lifetime. So it would make that tax burden so much more for the heirs. In this case, we've eliminated that tax burden. The charity is not going to have to pay taxes on that either. Okay, so how do we select worthy charities? Well, according to the National Center for Charitable Statistics, there's more than 1.5 million nonprofit organizations here in the US. Now, understand that approximately 275,000 automatically lost their tax exempt status in 2016 for failing just to file an annual report for 3 consecutive years. So there's some charities that don't even know they lost their tax exempt status that are out there still collecting donations. So things that you want to look for is you want to have an established charity, something that's been there for a while. You want to have performance, a charity that's going to accomplish what you want to support. They're going to have financial stability and be efficient, be able to get the money to the charity and have good leadership. So those are the items that you're looking for in these charities. So where can we find things like that? There are a lot of websites here. And as Caitlin posts the slides from this presentation, you'll have all of these to be able to look into. You'll be able to look into these to find out as much as how much of the charitable contributions actually go to the charitable cause, to are they in existence. The Internal Revenue Service, you can find out if the charity exists very easily by going to irs.gov. And they have a charity search right on their front page. And understand their tax records are public. So you can see where the money's coming from and where it's going to. Oh, and if you want to find a really good deserving charity, you may want to give back to the industry that's giving you so much along the way. And so I would refer you to OAFP's website, and in particular, the Ohio AFP.org/foundation. They do go through a lot of the advanced techniques to give you a refresher on that whenever you're working with either your advisor, or if you don't have an advisor, we work with a lot of people on some of the advanced techniques. So when we're looking at ways to give to these charities, there are direct gifts. Certainly people think of cash. Various classes of property, such as appreciated assets, life insurance, real estate. I'm sure the charities, not all charities take all types of gifts, so you check with your charity first if they'll take that. Split interest vehicles are those where you retain something out of the gift and the charity receives something. So charitable remainder trust, where you're taking income while you're alive, and maybe it's you and your spouse and the charity gets the remainder. Charitable lead trust, where the charity is getting the income and it reverts back to your family either after a period of years. Pooled income funds or charitable gift annuities, where you put assets into a fund and then you're receiving income for the rest of your life. The nice thing about a charitable gift annuity often is that if you perchance outlive the assets, the charity still does have to fund that annuity for the rest of your life if that's what you've chosen, a lifetime payout. So there are some other benefits that may accrue to you in here. Philanthropic structures, such as a donor advised fund or a community foundation or a supporting organization. I would put OAFP's foundation in that group. And private foundations, those of your own operating foundation or your private family foundation. So there are a lot of different alternatives that we can do with this. Now, when we ask people what they really want to pass on to their kids, only about 32% answer financial assets or real estate. 43% say personal possessions or things that have an emotional attachment to it. 47% want to do instructions and wishes to be fulfilled. And a full 74% really wish that they can pass on values and life lessons. And yet what happens is many people do a lot of work in their wills and trust on the financial assets and don't do as much work on the values and life lessons. So if you really want to energize your philanthropy, what you pass on to your heirs is going to be extremely important. High net worth families typically say it's important to teach their children to manage wealth, To encourage entrepreneur values in their children, 87% say that. Impress on children the importance of philanthropy. That's 82% have answered that. So if you can pass that philanthropic tendency onto the families, you then are going to magnify your gift. Teach children social responsibility. It's tough, especially in a high net worth family, to grow up as a child and to understand where we are as a society. Antonio Lamborghini, I hope my values are understood and internalized by my children, and they'll want to continue 200 years of family legacy. So the question there is, how young is too young to start talking about charity or philanthropy to the kids? Let them be kids, right? But how young do you figure it is that we start teaching them different skills, dancing, sports, and how much money and time we put into this and doing this? And it would be just as easy to put a little bit of time into teaching them philanthropy. A nice website to go is www.sharesavespend.com. These are ways that we start teaching little kids. Here's your allowance. A certain amount has to go into each jar. And you can spend immediately the amount in the first jar. Now, for a young kid, saving and saying saving for the future might be until Power Rangers goes off TV for them. That's what they think of the future. So you want to start to save as a very short period of time, maybe longer than Power Rangers, maybe a month, maybe a little bit more. But the key here is, you notice the bill in here, for that money that's saved, we've added a little bit of money to it, and that would represent the money they would earn over time from investing that money. Same way with the share side of this. So they get to decide how much do they want to share. And it doesn't necessarily, at the very young ages, have to go to a 501c3 or a charitable organization. This can go to any charitable cause and help the child understand what charitable causes are and have them help decide where that goes. And again, we typically add some more money in that because to let them know that when you share those assets, they're going to have a much bigger return. So we should start philanthropy as a family tradition, whether that's done non-cash wise, volunteer as a family, giving a whole closer to using a donor advised fund that we've created, and create a family committee to figure out how should this be invested, what kind of grant making guidelines should we have, and name children as the successors on here. So when you die, they become the successor donor advisor on this. I have a family that the core family lives in Michigan and they winter in Florida. Every Christmas season, they fly the whole family down to Florida and have their celebrations. They also have family meetings at that time. And they also decide who's going to be the recipient of their donor advised fund that year as a family. And so they get this family philanthropy going. And they also know that any of the family members, actually anybody, but any of the family members that want to contribute to the donor advised fund that's named for their family, that becomes a tax deductible contribution for them as well. So that family uses a single donor advised fund and keeps the family together that way. We have a program that we work with clients called Building the 100-Year Portfolio, where we do start legacy planning right from the beginning, preschool age, how much things cost, allowances, setting goals, spend, save, give. Starts at a very young age. Banking power of compound interest, work, taxes, and economic as they go through adolescence and get into young adulthood. The use and cost of debt. We talk about kids coming out of college with college debt. We want them to understand how debt's used. Philanthropy, investment management, and wealth transfer solutions, both living and beyond life. So the way we do, and as we're wrapping up here, the way we look at this is that we start out by recording a foundation interview. How the family, what's the history of the family, and why are we starting these type of things? We come up with a family mission statement, and this is typically done at a family meeting, how we help each other, support each other, how we take risks and help. we come up with a family philanthropy statement. What kind of goals are important to us and what kind of philanthropies are there? And then schedule a family meeting. We make it comfortable, make it a safe space where everybody can talk, have everybody attend, and have an agenda. Oftentimes, you may want to have a facilitator so that people don't feel like they're being talked to by the patriarch so much, but it's a group meeting. So what we need to do to make this family cohesion is that we start looking at a written family mission statement, investment policy statement, and philanthropy, and have regular family meetings. And we have some type of central philanthropic vehicle to be a recipient of that family philanthropy. And as you look for vehicles, I want to put Caitlin's picture up here, Director of Foundation Strategic Programs for OAFP. And again, the website where I perused this website, and it's a very, very good website, very entertaining. You find a lot of information, not only about what OAFP Foundation does, but the different strategies that you can use to contribute. Or if you want, you can get a hold of me at Sailing Sims Associates at the contact information there.